The world has ended and the protagonist doesn't feel fear, despair, or even distaste. He feels excitement. We are taken to a flashback to when he was working as an office worker when he was an overweight loser who couldn't even hold a conversation, let alone make any friends. In this society, having social skills is very important if you want to fit in. Surprisingly, the protagonist did archery as a kid and by the looks of it he did well, but now all he is doing is wasting away at a computer with no family. Even in his workplace barely anyone knows his name. Then someone shows up inviting him for lunch. His name is Adam. He is the opposite of the protagonist. He is a born leader who can do all the talking for the protagonist. Normally the main character declines going to lunch because it's too awkward, but he thinks Adam will be different, so he accepts his invite. As they wait for the elevator, a lady called Carolyn who works as HR and another lady joins the men in lunch since Adam invited them. In the elevator, Carolyn takes to Adam saying he might get fired if he uses the company card too often. She then turns to the MC and points out it's strange that he is joining them. Suddenly the elevator shakes, making everyone startled. Adam tries reassuring everyone that it's most likely an electrical issue. Just to prove him wrong, the elevator shook even more violently, making everyone brace themselves for something. Adam yells the protagonist's name, which is Jake, to push the emergency button. He does so, but Carolyn points out that nothing happened when he did. The lights immediately went out. Adam asked if everyone was alright. They look up and see a system message saying the invitation of the 93rd universe is confirmed. Introduction and tutorial sequence commencing. It's not only these 5 people seeing the message but everyone in the city. A mysterious being also sees it and says more lambs to the slaughter. But it's not like he will be important to the plot or anything, right? We are immediately brung back to Jake, who is sat at a steel table confused about where he is. On the other side of the table we can see an alien-looking thing that said "Hello human." Jake immediately freaks out, saying, "What the heck are you?" Suddenly a 5-minute timer shows on the top of his head. He introduces himself as someone who will introduce him to his new reality and that they can only speak for 5 minutes. At first Jake is confused about what he meant. Then suddenly a status window pops up in front of him. Jake is confused about what he is looking at, but the alien explains that it is a system and that it shows various states and other pertinent details about Jake's new reality. The alien goes on saying that the system came to be when Jake's universe passed the minimum requirements to enter the multiverse, and that any information beyond this will be relayed to you as you need to know them. Jake isn't sure if that information is amazing or ridiculous. The alien then cuts in, now wanting him to pick his class. Now Jake takes the time to think about all the classes and then finally chooses a class that he is very familiar with, which is archery. The alien explains that the time he had to explain the introduction is coming to an end and will transport Jake to the Great Forest, which is a tutorial. The alien goes on saying the Great Forest is filled with danger or opportunity for any newly initiated races like the humans. Beasts roam the forest hunting for prey. Kill the beasts to acquire tutorial points, TP, and gain new and more powerful skills. Perhaps they will have a chance to hunt for beast lords themselves. The tutorial will last 64 days, in which the remaining survivors will be granted final rewards based on their collected TP. That is all the alien needed to say. Jake thinks that he is starting to feel excited about all this. Everyone from the elevator has now been transported to the Great Forest together, but they are all equally confused. Jake takes a look at himself and says, "Not bad." He then looks at the forest and realizes that it is massive. Adam speaks up, reassuring everyone and wanting to take a quick breather. The ground suddenly shakes and Adam commands everyone to go down and stay calm. We then cut to a party of 7 walking through the forest. Someone who looks like the leader points his sword at a bush, shouting to show themselves. A kid walks out of the bush asking to not attack him and tells he was only looking for his party. The team reassures the kid that they won't attack him. The mage of the group asks the kid when he saw his party last. The kid tells him that he and his party got attacked immediately when they respawned and got separated in the fight. The leader says the boy can stay with them until they find his party. The kid smiles and thanks them, but the blood-stained knife on the kid's belt says that he isn't so innocent. We cut back to Jake's party talking about what just happened to them. Adam tells them that it will be okay and to take one step at a time. Jake thinks to himself that Adam really is a natural-born leader. Adam says that they need to locate shelter, water, and food. Jake thinks to himself that they aren't the only survivors, and that the time given to them will be crucial for learning skills and getting the hang of the system. Adam is trying to wrestle with a moose, but he's clearly struggling, so Jake shot an arrow at its hit, killing immediately. Jake thinks to himself that Carolyn is the party's only healer, but that she is getting the hang of it quickly. It's nightfall and the party is sitting around a fire. Carolyn praises Jake for his bow skills, but Jake is only happy because Carolyn knows his name. Adam then tells him that everyone is defaulting to him because of their old jobs, but that he would like a hand when things get rough. Adam then places his hand on his shoulder, but Jake says he can't since he can't speak like the way Adam and Carolyn does. Adam goes on saying that it's a new world and old rules don't apply anymore. Hours pass and while the team sleeps, Adam and the purple-haired girl are first to keep watch. The girl suddenly says that her husband and her were going to have lunch and that they were only a few hundred feet away from each other when things went crazy. She then asks if Jake had a girlfriend. He says no, but internally he thinks not anymore and that he had one back in college and that he had only two real friends named Andy and Madeline, and he was his roommate and a great guy. He goes on thinking that he could trust Andy with his life, and he was in love with Madeline. Neither one of them were social and they enjoyed solitude together. Jake believes that those 2 years were his happiest, but he's not sure if he just convinced himself to think that. We then come back to the present where the purple-haired girl is crying and telling that Jake may be better off alone, but every time she thinks of her husband her stomach twists with anxiety. Jake thinks that he should say something, but then she excuses herself and walks off. Jake thinks that Adam wants him to be the leader and the purple-haired girl whose name is Joanna is even opening up to him. He thinks maybe Adam was right. Things may be different here. An audible scream goes off in the forest and Jake is immediately running towards the source of it. We see that Joanna is on the floor with 3 intimidating men with weapons over her. They ask her where her team is while slowly crushing her foot. She acts dumb and claims she doesn't know. When she doesn't tell them, the guy in orange says have it your way and slams his hammer on her foot, effectively crushing it and rendering it useless. Suddenly multiple arrows shoot out. One arrow goes through the neck of one, killing him, but the guy in the green blocks. And he runs to where the arrows were fired at but is confused when he sees no one there. Jake then comes at him from behind and tries to stab him with an arrow but fails and gets thrown. The guy in green tries to slash him with his double-sided axe, but Jake blocks it with his bow. He looks over and sees that Joanna passed out but is confused when he doesn't see that guy in orange. He then looks behind himself and sees the guy in orange charging at him with his hammer. And he sees that his bow is about to break from the axe. He then looks to his left and sees an arrow flying towards him. In this moment something inside him awakened and he is able to feel everything around him slowing down. It is then revealed that he had a bloodline awakening called the bloodline of the primal hunter. He dodges the hammer, catches the arrow and throws it at the guy in orange. He then grabs a sword off the ground and slashes the guy with the double-handed axe. Suddenly arrows start coming at him in all directions, but he slices all of them looking like a badass. He drops the sword and tells the last guy to come at him. The last guy pulls out a knife then grabs Jake's cape, and when he's about to stab him, Jake pulls out an arrow then stabs the guy in the eye and then the chest. Jake's team shows up asking if they are okay, then they see Jake in the body and ask what happened. But in response Jake only said that he won with a smile. He sits up and sees a system message saying he killed survivors and got TP from it. He also gained a new skill, which is in TH unique class. The description says that dormant power lies in the very essence of your being unlocked sphere of perception, which adds 5% to perception. Adam asks why those guys would attack them and Jake says it might have been for TP since he got a lot of it. We can see Carolyn starting to healing Joanna's bent leg. Adam suggests that they might wait out the tutorial, but then Carolyn says Jake's name and asks Jake why Joanna was by herself. Jake nervously replies because Joanna was feeling anxious and he thought that she needed space. Carolyn states that since Joanna's leg was to crushed, her healing won't be enough and asks him what he thinks they're supposed to do. Jake asks if she is trying to blame him. Adam joins in and says no and that he helped her, but why did he let her go by herself, and why didn't he wake one of them? Jake defends himself saying that it was a split-second decision and that he just followed his instincts. Joanna speaks up saying that he should give it some thought next time, that they are humans, not beasts who act without care. She goes on saying what if he dies out there? Jake, getting increasingly annoyed, tried to apologize a second time for what he had done. Carolyn cuts him off by screaming what if Joanna had died? Everyone was silent after that statement, waiting for Jake's answer. Jake then snaps and yells while they get a grip and says that Joanna only survived because of him and that if he took the time to wake them up then who knows what could have happened. Everyone is shocked. He continues saying those are people, not deer. He then points at Adam and says, could he have the balls to take another person's life? He then points at everyone else saying that the world has changed and stop expecting people to give you a helping hand and to learn to adapt to survive. The blue-haired guy then asks Jake what he suggests for them to do. Jake started walking off, but when he heard the question he stopped and said that they should do whatever they can to survive and level up. Jake woke up and saw Casper sitting beside him. Jake revealed that he expected everyone to ditch him after what he said. Casper agrees and said that everyone talked about it and agreed that everyone needs to start carrying their own weight. A flashback shows that Casper was the closest thing that Jake had to friends besides Adam. They both bonded over the fact that they had pathetic romantic lives. Back to the present, Jake looks up and is surprised when he sees Joanna with an amputated foot. Casper clarified that it was Joanna's idea and they are betting that when Carolyn is leveled up she can grow her leg back. Jake thinks to himself that Joanna is incredible and that she may be the toughest one out of all of them. He noticed that ever since last night everyone is starting to really give it their all. Jake thinks to himself that Bertram, who is the guy with the shield, is the best fighter in the group besides Jake, and that Joanna is making good use of her ranged magic. He also notices that Carolyn is by far the most impressive, and he thinks that what happened with Joanna awakened something inside her. Everyone was given beginner equipment and some even got potions, but none was powerful enough to heal Joanna's leg. And without knowing how to make more healing potions, Carolyn has become an invaluable asset to the team. But ever since the Joanna incident last night, Jake and Carolyn haven't spoken a word to each other. Jake is confused on which one of them is supposed to say something first, so he is just going to act like nothing happened. An hour later, we can see that Jake is blindfolded with Casper behind with dirt in his hand, asking Jake if he is sure about this. Jake confirms and says to throw it at him. As Casper is getting ready to throw it, Jake thinks to himself, saying an attack is coming, just focus on your breathing, and before he could finish his thought, the dirt hit him on his back. Jake is confused why he did not awaken like last time, but thinks it's because Casper wasn't trying to harm him, so it did not awaken, and he only awakens when there is an actual threat. Adam calls everyone and says that they need to find shelter for the night. They find a cave and they all agree that it looks like a safe enough spot and it will protect them from the rain. Jake thinks to himself that if he is alert that he should be able to prevent any attacks while looking at Joanna's amputated leg. Adam sees him staring and asks if Jake is still thinking about last night. Jake confirms this and says that he doesn't want to make the same mistake twice. Adam puts a hand on Jake's shoulder and apologizes for yesterday and says he didn't mean to blame him and that Jake didn't deserve that. After the apology, Adam makes his way to the front of the group and leads them inside. Jake thinks to himself that Adam is a good man and contemplates that they could have survived the first day without him and his leadership. He even admits that he's not sure if he would have been here if it weren't for him. It then shows a flashback of Adam introducing himself to Jake and telling him that he requested for them to be on the same team. He goes on saying that he thinks that they will work well together. After introductions, Adam invites Jake to lunch. Jake agrees while blushing. Back to the present, the cave starts to make weird noises. The team is weary but is ready to fight if they have to. Suddenly, pieces of rocks start to break off from the cave. Jake says quickly that they need to leave. As they run, the cave starts to collapse on itself. As they are running, rocks suddenly begin to fall to where Carolyn is. Jake immediately stops running away and runs toward her to save Carolyn before the rocks crush her. When Jake saves her, the rocks falling creates a wall which separates the rest of the team from Jake and Carolyn. Jake asks if Carolyn is okay. She confirms, saying that she's fine. Adam yells Jake's and Carolyn names to check if they can hear him. Carolyn responds saying that they are there. Jake shushes her and informs her that the cave is unstable and that something might be lurking here, so it would be better if they kept their voices down. Carolyn notices that there are too many rocks to move out of the way. Bertram offers to break the wall, but Adam declines his offer, saying that they shouldn't touch anything. Adam reassures the rest of the team that there are other pathways in the cave and they are bound to intersect somewhere. Jake thinks that that might not be true, but it's their safest option. Jake tells his team through the wall that they will go further in and try to meet halfway, but he thinks to himself that they still don't know what monsters live down here as he walks forward, and that he can protect himself, but not sure if he can also protect Carolyn. Carolyn says to Jake that they will be okay and reassures him that she will not die in a cave. An hour of walking later, Adam starts to doubt if they made the right plan. Bertram cheers up Adam, saying that those two are better suited for surviving here than them. He continues saying even if Jake makes him uneasy, he confirms that Jake is the strongest one out of them and with Carolyn's healing they will be fine. Adam looks at Bertram and asks, "He makes you uneasy?" Bertram elaborates saying that he agreed to what Jake had said before and all of them need to be stronger, but Adam saw the way Jake lay down in a pool of blood looking like a madman. Adam gives Jake the benefit of the doubt and says it is because he barely survived an attack, so he would expect a bit of weird behavior. Bertram softly says that people change in times of crises and he thinks that right now Jake's a loose cannon. Adam dismisses the claim and says that Jake is a friend and that he needs to trust him. Cut back to Jake and Carolyn walking through the cave. She notices blood on Jake's arm. Jake didn't notice and thinks it might have come from the fall. Carolyn rolls up Jake's cape and is wanting to heal it. Jake is surprised and asks her if isn't she mad at him. She replies back saying that even if they had an argument she won't allow his wound to get infected. Then she tells him to hold still. Jake is confused about what to do in this situation when he starts remembering his conversation training and thinks of asking her a question. Carolyn starts scolding him a little, saying that they know that he's strong but no one is invincible. She continues saying that she's still learning magic so she can't heal everything yet. Jake decides to ask her why she chose to become a healer. She dodges the question and asks why he became an archer. He answers that he'd just pick one that he'd be best for survival. Carolyn echoes the word survival and says that is why she chose to become a healer. She wraps a cloth around his arm and continues saying that she didn't know much about the tutorial, but that she played a few games and knew healer would be the least picked class. Jake asks if she plays games. Carolyn says not anymore. She confesses that her younger brother spent a lot of time in the hospital when they were kids, and that she sometimes goes weeks without being able to visit him, so they played games together to keep in touch. Jake didn't realize that Carolyn had a brother. She blushes and says everyone has made her play healer since she was a girl. First she hated it and wanted to be a fighter, but then realized that fighters always had trouble finding parties. But being healer, people went out of their way to send her invites to join them. She goes on saying that she didn't know who she would run into, but that she knew that if she could heal she would be protected and she would survive. Jake tells her that her plan is really smart. She claps back saying he thought she was dumb? Or maybe Jake never thought much of her at all. Jake thinks to himself that she's right. He had a crush on her all this time, but maybe never stopped and thought about how she was as a person. As she finished tying a cloth on his arm, she says that he is good as new. She then says for them to keep moving. Then they both notice a fork in the path. Carolyn asks Jake what way they should go. Jake doesn't speak but looks at the wall and asks her if she could feel that. He says to her that his sphere of perception didn't activate, but it's like he could sense something down in one of the paths there. We then see blue eyes glowing in the ceiling of the dark path. He then says that something is terrifying. Thank you for watching until the very end. Please like and subscribe, and if enough of you comment the Primal Hunter, I will do a part 2.